everybody. I'm Grace O'Gorman, your host today. I'm the External Affairs Director and I lead our international team at the UK Agri-Tech Centre. I can promise you a real treat today. I am joined by not one, but two leading lights. First up, we have Charlie Guy, the CEO and founder of LettUs, a world-leading advanced aeroponics technology business. You're very welcome today, Charlie. Lovely to see you. And the second Charlie in the lineup, Charlie Mercer, the Policy Director at the Unstoppable Startup Coalition. Really fabulous to have you here today. So what's on the menu? We're talking about business growth and barriers to scale, something that's incredibly important for companies like LettUs, but of course, all of the companies you work with, Startup Coalition as well. And this conversation forms part of a wider series of events, both online and in person. You'll see them on the UK Agri-Tech Centre's website as part of our Growth Week, which runs from the 2nd to the 6th of February and supported by our Grow Your Own Way campaign. So let's start with our panellists. We'll introduce them, say hello and get to know a little bit more about them. For LettUs, Charlie, give us a little potted summary, if you will, about the company, your role in it, and maybe just a little bit about what's keeping you interested in your work this week.
Yeah, great to be here, Grace. Thanks for the invite today. So I'm Charlie Guy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of LettUs. We're an indoor agriculture company, so we're focused on the advanced greenhouse sector, also some of the high-tech indoor farms that you see as well. So whether that's single layer, stacked, we don't mind. We're focused on boosting the productivity, boosting yield, reducing water consumption, and really supporting growers worldwide to get the most out of their indoor system, whether that's in a greenhouse or a more controlled environment. What's keeping me interested, motivated? It's the start of a new year, and we've got a lot of really exciting projects that we're supporting all over the world now. So last year we developed and delivered projects across Europe, so Italy, Switzerland, in India, in Kuwait, and also most recently in Canada, North America. So we are across multiple continents now, and we've got projects that are all driving to scale up and increase their impact, increase the scale of what they're doing with our technology. So we're super excited to be supporting those, doing that from our base here in the UK, here in Bristol, is really exciting for me and really exciting for our team.
A fabulous example of a company that's really done that, the big bit, which is scaling. Thanks, Charlie. And not too far away, also in Bristol, Charlie Mercer, what's going on with the Startup Coalition? Give people a bit of an introduction if they've not heard of you already. I see you've had a very busy start to the year.
What's not going on with the Startup Coalition, Grace? No, we're very privileged at Startup Coalition because we basically get to spend most of our time with founders like Charlie, learning about, frankly, the magical things that they're doing up and down the length and breadth of the UK. We also have to chat to policymakers and parliamentarians, which is often a pleasure, sometimes a chore. But the role we play and have played for the last 16 years is really sitting at that interface between the two worlds, two very different worlds, and understanding, again, what's going on in the UK for venture-funded businesses. Where are we punching above our weight? Where have we got the next, unicorn in the making? And then, crucially, where is government policy, regulation, catalyzing those unicorns, or indeed hindering their growth? And we do an amazing job in the UK of inventing stuff, early stage innovation. We have incredible universities. We have an entrepreneurial spirit across every part of this wonderful country. We're not the best at scaling, so that is a theme that we, as the ecosystem has matured, and again, we've been doing this for 16 years now. So we've seen a number of firms really scale to huge heights, but all too often, amazing firms don't get to that stage. So we're going to be spending a lot of time this year, I think, thinking about scale up, and a very timely announcement yesterday from Business Secretary Peter Kyle, who's also focusing on scale up. And alongside that, every day, making sure that we are keeping our ears to the ground, speaking to amazing founders like Charlie, and understanding where we can provide, support, assistance, advice, but then crucially, campaigns that win and make the UK the best place in the world to start, scale, and exit.
Sounds like it's particularly timely to talk about scale. So yeah, fabulous to have you both here. Thinking about LettUs and going back, dialing back the years a little bit, Charlie, what was really thinking about it the moment you realized you went from a great idea, thinking about the sustainable tech that you had and turning that into a commercial business? Was there a penny drop moment when you thought this can actually really happen?
Yeah, I guess with you asked me to cast my mind back further than I'd like now. We actually founded the business 10 years ago, so it's been a decade of developing the core technology that sits at the heart of what we do. And for those that don't know what we do, which maybe a lot of people listening, we've developed a new way of growing plants in controlled environments using aeroponics. So this is an advancement on hydroponics, which is ubiquitous across a lot of fresh produce production in greenhouses. In hydroponics, it's lots of different ways of growing where you aren't growing in soil, but you're feeding plant roots directly, and the roots are growing into a media. In aeroponics, what we do is we massively increase the oxygen available to the roots for plants by the roots actually growing hanging in air and in a mist, and we feed them with their nutrition via that mist. And what we've seen through that, and this is the sort of a bit of an aha moment that we had, a bit of a penny drop and a real exciting specific moment I remember is when the first grower that we were working with locally saw their first crop come off of our technology. And this is when it was not in any way a mature technology. This was very early days, and this was a small scale hydroponic grower, and you did side-by-side tests with our technology, which was in no way optimized at this point. And the crop was just twice as big in our system to the system next to it, the hydroponics. And I remember one of the early team members at the time calling me and just hearing the excitement down the phone from the grower he was with, and seeing the different, the leaves were twice as big. And it wasn't very scientific at this point, but it was very much, okay, we're on to something here. This isn't just, there's been a lot of literature, a lot of R&D around aeroponics over the years. It was first developed by NASA back in the 80s. But it's never been commercialized. And that's where we set ourselves the challenge of, okay, can we take this from being a technology which has been stuck in the lab and turn it into an industrialized, commercially relevant technology that we can help growers with all over the world?
So, Charlie, does that sound like proving the tech bit, which sounds fabulous? I can only imagine that light bulb moment was somewhat easier than this economics, proving the case of it, which is always a much more gnarly issue to get into. Which do you think is the bigger headache?
I guess that point for me wasn't proving the tech. That was anecdotal, this has worked in this particular instance. And the actual burden of proof that growers, farmers need to then, implement something on a multi-million-pound project, where it is the core of the project, is quite different. And that's the piece that we've done a lot more work with in the years since that initial sort of aha and excitement moment. And we've been through a number of different ways of doing that. We've worked with world leading organizations in the Netherlands, first here in the UK as well, with places like Harper Adams and the John Innes Centre. And then to get, everyone globally knows that most greenhouse technology and most of the big project companies are based in the Netherlands. So we took what we were doing over there and were met with a lot of skepticism, because hydroponics is, the way, the only way. So bringing a new way of growing that hadn't come out of Dutch growers or Dutch academia was definitely met with some skepticism. So we had to prove it out there in a very academic way before going to commercial growers there. And we've now got 3, soon to be 4 projects in Holland. But it took that academic proof to come before moving on to commercial growers. So yeah, I guess they do go hand in hand, this sort of scientific proof and the commercial proof. And often the challenge for a business within agriculture, horticulture, is seasonality. And that's where, getting the repeats in, getting the amount of data and proof, whether that's scientific data or whether that is commercial economic data, it can just take longer than other sectors and other businesses, because you need that full season of data at a certain scale for a certain crop in certain conditions. And that's actually where, for us, a business, we used the control that you get in a vertical farm to accelerate those processes, to accelerate the testing. And that's for us, and in many ways, why we've seen a lot of that R&D happen in more controlled environments, to do the scientific bit faster, but then you run into the economic proof bit. I think we'll come on to that later.
Yeah, it's almost like two tracks, but you found one way to control it a little bit and to drive it forward, but at the same time,
trying to work out how to accelerate one of them, but you still got to be doing both at the same time.
And maybe that's one of the big lessons I was going to ask you at the end, in terms of keeping that show on the road. But just pinging back to the policy environment. So whilst Charlie's busy running a company, scaling it, growing it, getting, having the tech working in the real world, convincing audiences in the Netherlands that it really works, back home, we're sat in this policy environment, which is very real, tangible impacts on UK businesses, whether we like to think about it or not. So Charlie, you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly with policy and regulation, potentially slowing down innovation. Are there any examples you can think of where actually things are really holding us back, or other examples where you think right now we're going to take leaps forward, things have changed, and we're going to step forward into a bright new tech positive innovation ecosystem in the UK?
Yeah, so I think I will go, your framing there of good, bad, and ugly, I think is really helpful, not least because actually all too often, particularly in my job, you kind of skip over the good, right? The government is never good enough. That is literally my job. If they announce something, well, what's next then? Fantastic. But actually, we are the third biggest startup ecosystem in the world, and that doesn't happen by accident. And it also doesn't happen just, with the government doing nothing at all. So over the last 20 years, we have seen successive governments of different stripes actually lay the foundations for entrepreneurs to succeed in the UK. The reality is we're never going to be the US, we're never going to be China. And as a consequence, we're actually doing a pretty good job then, because we are literally top of the best of the rest. So everything from the foundations being sown with foundational investment incentives under the Tony Blair administration, the coalition and expanded. We now have things like SEIS, EIS, which are means for early stage entrepreneurs to attract funding, R&D tax credits, which when they work can be really useful for firms and founders to get a little bit of a discount on a tax bill if they're doing amazing things. And if they work, is probably doing a lot of lifting there. And actually, right now, just as a very topical thing to reference, is that Treasury is currently consulting on tax incentives for entrepreneurs, and they are, the way that's been framed to us is not, they're not looking to necessarily cut back. Of course, there's always, when questions are asked, we've got to be careful that it's the answers the ones we're after, but ultimately, that's they want to be thinking about what more they could do, right? Where are these incentives not optimal? Where are they, not working for certain types of technologies? And also, now that the ecosystem has scaled, is there a need to refresh some of those foundational investment incentives? And that's this Labour government, right? So we do have real cross-party support for the concept of these firms. I think what we have definitely seen is, as there's the startup ecosystem and scale-up ecosystem in the UK has matured, and also we've moved towards more hardware firms and kind of to orient the conversation in the specific sector that we're here to talk about. There are different levers that need to be pulled by governments. And it is also not the case that the conventional equity funding model that is widespread across, across this world, and that originated in Silicon Valley and then came to Silicon Roundabout in Shoreditch and now has proliferated across the planet. It's not necessarily the case that same economic model can scale the sorts of firms that that Charlie is building. And as a consequence, there are different things the government needs to think about, and that's everything from the foundations of how easy is it to build a factory, right? If we want LettUs Grow to be building their products at scale and frankly designing a first of kind in the UK, how do we make sure they can do that fast for good value? And obviously it's going to cost probably quite a lot, Charlie, I imagine. But how do we make sure that it is affordable or is price competitive elsewhere? Because the other thing is that folks like Charlie are I'm sure very proud of where they've started, but the reality is that once you've got investors on board, and indeed if you are looking to really scale to the heights that many entrepreneurs want to take their businesses, they won't blindly just wait for the UK to be the best place in the world to scale where what they're doing. And we know that because we are best of the rest, right, we have some very jealous eyes looking at us from across the world and emulating the policy success we've had. So France now has a similar sort of tax incentive scheme to us in EIS, looks like EIS and SEIS. We know that the Middle East is looking at our climate tech ecosystem really keenly, because they are thinking about future-proofing their economies and being the home of the next generation of energy technologies, but beyond as well. Singapore as well thinks really interestingly about the food system, because they have to. So there are other motivations that other countries are have that maybe inject an urgency that we don't have, because we have these amazing firms and we can't be complacent about the fact that they will be here forever. And again, while my job is not necessarily to say, Charlie, this is what you should do. Far from it. Charlie should do what he's got to do. I am interested in making sure that the government lays the foundations for that to be a really compelling choice. And it isn't the case that once firms reach a certain stage, automatically they're flipping to Delaware or they're scampering off across the channel to Macron, right? It's not hard to get there. So, there's a real urgency that the government needs to think innovatively about these policies and not take these firms for granted.
It sounds like lots of things to be really encouraged by, building on years and years of work and this real enthusiasm for pulling all sorts of levers and realizing there's more to it than just that investment finance piece. There's very practical realities to it. And I love the idea of creating, I suppose, a really encouraging environment for companies when they do start to grow and scale, that they can stay in the UK should they wish to do that. So I think that's fabulous. From LettUs Grow's perspective, does that resonate with your experience in terms of some of those barriers and challenges that you've had? Do they sit more in that sort of funding finance pot or regulation or policy, or is it just access to talent, some of the bricks and mortar stuff, some of the practical elements? What big buckets would you have in terms of what the big challenges were for you, Charlie?
Where have the biggest challenges been? I mean, there's been a lot of hurdles along the way. We've been through quite an interesting time to be building a business, especially within our sector. Anyone that's followed the sort of big boom and bust of vertical farming, especially, which is a subsector of what we do and what we're involved in, will know that that's not been an easy ride. So if we talk about funding, we've gone from there being a lot of money pumped into the sector when we were starting out to it being, very much a bit of a, sector to avoid at the moment in terms of the vertical sector, with a lot of restructuring, different types of finance coming in, like Charlie said, from those typical sort of VC investors. So funding has been an interesting one. I could talk for hours about that journey in itself and what's been good and bad. I would say from a policy perspective, EIS is it has a phenomenal impact on UK businesses that are working in often university spin out sectors, or people that have businesses that are building from a real core sort of IP base like we were. EIS is a phenomenal tool for I guess encouraging investment into those higher risk areas. It really does encourage that with a certain type of investor and people with a certain wealth in the UK. It's a really fantastic mechanism for businesses. I don't know how I expect our sector. Charlie might have some facts on this. I expect the sector to be a lot smaller without EIS in terms of the investment into early stage businesses in the UK. From a regulatory point of view, we're not too held back. The main thing for us really and historically has been how products in the UK, might be differentiated on the shelf. We've only really got one, because everything is consolidated under the supermarkets generally in UK sort of fresh produce. There's not too many distinguishers on value of product, quality of product. Obviously, everyone's got their different ranges, taste the difference, etc. But the other one is organic. Like organic commands a 20% on average premium. So if you're producing a better crop in the UK using methods that aren't organic, or using other, methods that don't fit in the organic bucket but are, good in terms of water usage, no pesticides, grown locally, all these other very positive things from a sustainability perspective, there's no real way of differentiating. So that remains a barrier for growers, I think, in the UK. You're either organic or you're not. and therefore, yeah, there's not too many different ways of differentiating on a price perspective when you're actually growing a better quality product or a more sustainable product or a product that is better in X other ways. Talent-wise, I mean, the UK is fantastic. Where we are in Bristol, brilliant. We have not struggled from that perspective, especially on more of the sort of technical roles. We, as I mentioned, a lot of our strategy is about partnering with firms globally, whether they're Dutch or in the US or global project firms. And that, I guess, is the piece that I'd love it if we could have found those firms in the UK. The size of our market is probably the biggest limitation there around greenhouses and protected cropping, which means those firms aren't in the UK. We're proudly partners with Cambridge HOK, the leading sort of greenhouse company here, but the amount of growing area that we have in the UK just is very small on a global scale. So those opportunities for large scale projects, we do have to have a very global outlook, and we've been really supported by DBT and other organisations within government to obviously the UK Agri-Tech Centre as well, outside of government, to really explore that and push into different markets. Because in many ways, if you're a technology company within agriculture, agri-tech in the UK, most of the time you have to have a global outlook if you're looking at the return profiles that are needed for a venture-backed business. So that's where we have had a lot of support to look globally from a UK base.
Fantastic. And I think it's a huge lesson to learn, isn't it, as early as possible, is having that international mindset from the get-go. It's real survival, but then translating that into massive opportunity. And Startup Coalition, Charlie, of course, you're based in the UK. How do you navigate that UK versus global and getting the benefits for UK startups as well from that connectedness? Is that something that you're plugged into as well?
So to some degree, the reality is if I started knocking on Charlie's door and saying I can introduce you to international customers, I think we would probably be doing little else than that. And there are other colleagues such as the UK Agri-Tech Centre who are obviously doing amazing work in that space. Our international lens is more from perspective of one, where can we leverage and emulate best practice from elsewhere? But two, where have we got competitive threats, right? And I think in this space, Charlie's mentioned that the Netherlands is far and away. It's a different paradigm over there because they have had for many, many years a concerted focus by government on a sector. And as a consequence, it's probably, again, we're not necessarily ever going to be on a par, but we need to be mindful of how they've gone about doing that. Is there a UK flavour of that approach? And otherwise in the food sector more generally, again, I mentioned some of those jurisdictions before, places like Singapore and Israel that have thought about food production in a different way. The role of technologies, because of just them being smaller places, they have to think about this stuff. Interestingly, we have started to see the UK government think about ag tech in a more strategic way. So, and I should maybe have mentioned this before. So in terms of where we are, right, with this sector in general, Agri-Tech was identified by the UK government last year as one of 6 frontier industries within advanced manufacturing, which was a part of its industrial strategy. So we have a Labour government that does want to be more hands-on with steering the ship, not necessarily picking winning firms, but picking winning sectors and doubling down on those. And Agri-Tech was identified as one of those. And then alongside that, we've seen some work around with the food strategy coming out. So there was a UK food strategy about 4 or 5 years ago, which Henry Dimbleby wrote, which was an independent review and then responded to by the Boris Johnson government. And now we've got a refreshed one. I'd say, our verdict on that, and again, going back to, is it something that's going to put us on a par with some of these international leaders? Absolutely not, right? So first of all, and this gets you into the little peek behind the curtain of some of the weeds that we have to navigate. The way in which the government picks the sector, it's not as simple as saying this is what agri-tech is, right? Because obviously you need to have a way of classifying what you mean. And the way they do that is through these wonderful things called SIC codes or HS6 codes. And HS6 is about exporting products, and SIC codes, SIC codes, were designed to enable classification of the economy so that if the government was going to intervene, they could determine what they mean by agri-tech. Unfortunately, they have not been updated for 20 years. So if you're going to be intervening in the economy and you're excluding 20 years of innovation and technology, such as the work that Charlie's doing, you're not necessarily going to be able to intervene in the way you want. And usefully, they are being updated right now. Unfortunately, obviously, the fact that it hasn't happened already means that this industrial strategy and the year that we've had so far has probably been suboptimal for the sorts of firms that we are interested in. And again, a very niche example of this, the government is about to subsidize energy bills for big businesses and energy intensive firms, in addition to previous support they've announced, and through the British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme. And again, the way in which they're targeting firms under this scheme, which will result in a 90% discount on energy bills, is through the SIC code that they are classifying industries through. And unfortunately, we've been part of conversations with colleagues across many trade bodies who have made similar remarks. The horticultural sector is a massive loser in this space because of how it is currently classified under these SIC codes. And so we have a somewhat unfortunate situation where a policy that really could help the sector at large, because energy is a massive cost for Charlie's customers, they're missing out at the moment, right? And we have some of the highest energy bills in the world, and certainly in Europe. And this was an effort in the short term, because obviously the answer is actually we should have cheaper energy bills for everyone. But in the short term, targeting specific sectors identified in the industrial strategy. But unfortunately, because of how that policy is then being implemented and the tools at the disposal of the government, you're seeing a sector being left out accidentally because it was in their industrial strategy that this is a priority to support.
So there's something about serious coordination in there. So we're all pedaling hard in the right direction. And Charlie, LettUs Grow, is that a major thing? Would that kind of intervention just really move the dial in terms of your buyers and what might encourage them to get on board and take it forward? So kind of energy being potentially an Achilles heel, thinking about the wider vertical farming sector.
It's absolutely huge. You cannot underestimate the impact that being on the right side of that policy would make for our customers, to be able to do things that are more innovative, or to invest in expansion, or to improve how they're doing things, and to in many ways make their businesses financially sustainable, alongside the fantastic work that growers in the UK already do to create fantastic produce for us to eat. So it is a real sticking point right now. My background is renewable energy, and it's such a last year I was so encouraged to see Agri-Tech under the frontier industries, but then there's been a number of missteps like this one that Charlie mentions that have meant it's a bit of a there and in words but no action behind it. We've had it in other funding calls where it's been talked about that Agri-Tech fits in, but then the people that are running those calls sadly don't have any of the expertise. They're all based in renewable energy or other energy storage or energy intensive industry, like manufacturing industries, like metals and that sort of stuff. So it just means that there's a real missed opportunity, as I see it, to support the UK sector. From an energy perspective, our view is that greenhouses fit perfectly with the future view of the energy system that the UK government is trying to create, and to be a leader in renewable energy. We are a leader in renewable energy in terms of our production, and seeing the biggest allocation for renewables in the most recent contracts going out just a few weeks ago means that we are, we're almost on track for our 2030 targets, which is something to be proud of here in the UK. The thing that is limiting the rollout of renewables is the grid. By putting energy assets that serve the interests of our country, aka food production, on that grid alongside the increase in production, it helps. It doesn't hinder. It really helps, especially when you can use things like a greenhouse where a lot of the energy load is heating or lighting. If you can electrify that with renewables and use that flexibly, that really supports the rollout of renewables. So what we want to see, and what we've been talking about for a long time, is much more joined up thinking around food production, which ultimately, if you boil it down to its bare bones, is a form of energy production, and the renewable energy production, which is ever more so part of UK farmers' mix for how they can run sustainable businesses and steward the land in a responsible way. So we really want to see these things joined up in a way that means we don't run into these almost, the way Charlie laid it out, it's almost a comical hurdle, isn't it? Which obviously it's not for the growers that are and our customers that are impacted by this, but when you lay it out as clearly as Charlie just did, it's so frustrating to see. So we really want to see this joined up better, and we don't think it's hard, to be honest. But then Charlie knows more of the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts of what's actually needed on a policy side to make it happen.
So, Charlie, how hard is it to make lettuce growers' dreams come true?
It depends, right? And if thinking back to the successes we've had, again, we've been doing this for a little while now. People matter. So getting the right colleagues in the right place, equipped with the right evidence and the right backing from industry as well, we can move the dial. And I've spoken to some excellent, and obviously in the current era we're in, it's somewhat controversial to say excellent civil servants, but there are excellent civil servants really being very entrepreneurial behind the scenes to crack on with, for example, the issue that I spoke about. Right, they are aware of it. They're not head in the sand. They get that this is something they need to work out. Political direction and political championing is something that we also do need as well, though, because there's only so much civil servants can do on their own, because that's their role. And I think I would say that we would like to see probably a little bit more from the government in putting again the policy detail and the pace behind their aspirations. They talk plenty about food security. They talk plenty about the scale-up opportunity. They talk plenty about how expensive energy is. I think, to give the government some credit, we have seen, and Charlie mentioned the recent contracts. We are seeing significant investment in generation, absolutely. But he's also absolutely spot on that the network cost is what isn't going to hold that up. And with curtailment of wind energy alone potentially reaching 8 billion by 2030, that is a suboptimal outcome. I think we can all say that. And actually, it's not just yes, greenhouses are a really good option, but we have a government that wants to increase our domestic compute capacity by 20x. We have batteries. We've got amazing firms like Zenobē rolling out some of the biggest battery plants in the world in Scotland. So joined up thinking, as you said, Grace, an ambitious industrial strategy that meaningfully works out what role the government can play in co-location. And again, we should also increasingly look for a world in which you have real decentralization of the energy sector. We probably would say that the zonal pricing conversation last year was a missing opportunity, because that would have injected a bit of efficiency. But it's the fact that the government is still going to be reforming the national pricing of energy is a good thing, because you can start to see those locational markers implied in the energy bill. So they won't be explicitly zonal pricing, but you could also see at a distribution level some, the market being reflected. It should be cheaper to consume energy where it is being produced. We should be aspiring towards that outcome. And there are ways the government can do that, regardless of the REMA outcome last year. Beyond that, I think there's a whole bunch of other ways in which we think the government can have an outsized impact relatively quickly, and we're constantly looking for these. Right, we operate the same timelines that Charlie and Jack do at LettUs Grow, so we anticipate that us setting out a stall that takes years to deliver is not helpful for LettUs Grow. We need to be cracking on right now, pulling levers that the government has available to them right now. And to that end, in our food strategy response, submitted first half of last year before it was published, we were talking about a variety of really innovative things, we thought, but also quite short-term things, and this is going beyond horticulture, but expanding some of the Civil Aviation Authority's trials around beyond visual line of sight for drones. We should be looking for more autonomous robotics in farming as well. And also, and critically, putting farmers and food producers at the heart of this strategy. The ADOPT program is a very good program, and we see that all across the world. I was speaking to a colleague who had just come back from Australia recently and seen that farmer-driven innovation is the most sustainable in the kind of long term, but potentially in the green side as well, an economical form of innovation. So empowering farmers to make decisions that are in their economic self-interest, equipped with the most up-to-date novel technologies, is what the government should be aspiring to do. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they are spending a huge amount more than they are right now. It is a case of empowering the people who know what's going on, with the best technologies, and then you'll have hopefully this flywheel where we'll start to see these startups becoming scale-ups, getting access to customers, and crucially, supporting our food security across the UK.
Fantastic, Charlie. I was going to ask you for a vision for 10 years' time, but you've already answered it. That fabulously laid out, very interconnected, harmoniously there. But I think as well, we've got all of the ingredients, we've got the impetus, we've got the ability to do this. It's that probably hard graft on the ground of coordination and joining things up and working together quite collaboratively. Does that resonate for you as well at Let Us Grow, Charlie?
Yeah, absolutely. I was with a farmer just last week who is actually putting a lot of this into practice bit by bit. This co-location piece that Charlie mentioned just now of bringing together renewable energy generation, food production, waste disposal, water treatment, heat management and heat networks, packaging, distribution, all on one site. And it is really, really hard to do that in one go. It's really, really, it takes a long time to put those pieces of the puzzle together, and you have to do it one by one if you're doing it alone without a more coordinated strategy to support this. And it was really inspiring to see, this farmer doing that here in the UK bit by bit, and the progress they're making with just driven by the level of ambition was really fantastic to see. But the thing that would support that is, some of the things we've talked about that could make it go faster. I'm excited about some of the sort of more recently coming out Local Innovation Partnerships Fund funding. For those that don't know, I think it's a £500 million package from government through UKRI to support specific sectors and sector-based innovation in certain geographies. So there are pots of money coming out that, if the right people can work together to coordinate on, could start to see some of these ambitions and visions for a more circular and joined up energy and food mix come together faster. So I think leveraging some of the opportunities that the government has been working on and putting out there that are new and are actually supporting innovation within regions, whether that is Adopt or this LIPF funding that I just mentioned, that if we can get the right people there, as Chai just said, to be collaborating on this, we can move towards that joined up ambition much faster. So that's something I'm really excited about at the moment, is leveraging what there is, pushing for more. I've been pushing for Adopt to go to the next stage for pretty much since it came out. It's a great starting point to test innovations, but it doesn't enable you to scale them yet. So pushing for the Adopt seeding to go a bit higher to allow bigger impact for farmers that are really driving that innovation. That will be great to see as well. So I think there's some really good signs from what's coming through. It just requires a lot of first, it requires understanding of these pots and awareness, and then it requires concerted effort and collaboration between companies like ourselves and farmers and growers to make this stuff happen.
A lot of optimism there, Charlie, which I think you need as a co-founder and CEO of your own company. I'm thinking that's a basic ingredient, and it falls on me to tie this all up and to bring you right around to the beginning of this in your journey. And I suppose the only thing I'd ask you is, what advice would you give to other founders, Charlie, out there?
Optimism is a good one. It's definitely hard sometimes to keep that optimism. As I say, we've been going for 10 years now, and a lot of that optimism comes through, as I just sort of gave an example of, meeting other people that you can bounce off of and grow that optimism together, and make sure you can, push above the noise and the things that are often trying to beat that optimism down around you. So that connection with others that share your ambition, share your vision is really important, because that keeps you, when times are harder, keeps you focused on really having that impact at scale, which I think is what a lot of founders want, and why a lot of founders start businesses, because they want to do something that leaves the world in a better place than they found it. So that building those connections, making sure you invest in those relationships with the people that do give you energy and can meet or exceed your own ambitions and drive those to go further and faster is one of my big bits of advice, I'd say.
Fantastic. And we've been really privileged to be part of your journey as well, Charlie, watching you grow. And it's been fantastic and a brilliant example of what it takes to go internationally and to work collaboratively and connect all parts of the ecosystem. That's been fantastic for us. Charlie from Startup Coalition, I'll give you the final word in terms of, I said right at the beginning, you've had a really busy start to the year. How can people find out more about what you're doing? Are you on a roadshow? Are you doing events? Is there any fantastic consultations people can get involved in? Now's your time to plug.
It's almost like, Grace, you know exactly what we're up to. So yes, we are relentless in our outputs because that is what founders demand, and they're relentless. We have to be relentless too. So I mentioned earlier the government's currently consulting on foundational incentives for investors, and depending on when this comes out, that may well still be open because we've got until the end of February. Any views from founders who listen to this, get in touch through LinkedIn, through our website. Would love to hear them, particularly if you are from the horticultural sector, where the needs and wants will probably be a little bit different to some of the B2B SaaS firms that all too often flood our inboxes. Beyond and as part of that, we're going up and down the UK. I'm actually popping down to Engine Shed, just down the road from me in Bristol, after this to chat to a few founders there. And we're going to, I think the last count was 17 cities across the UK, including all 4 nations. That's the goal over the next 4 weeks. Beyond that, any policy or regulation that founders listen to this, investors listen to this, encounter that they think is holding back the growth of this wonderful sector, get in touch. Right, policy is plastic. So long as you have evidence, so long as you have a good narrative, and you have folks who authentically speak to why it's a good thing to change a policy, it can be done. It's hard. It requires really staying the course, and it can take a long time. And I mentioned just before we came online today, the Warm Homes Plan was published in the UK today, and there's hopefully something in there. We're just waiting for the final plan that we've been fighting for 4 years. Right, it takes time, but the best time to be engaging with this sort of thing is now, if you haven't done already. So please do get in touch.
Great note of optimism. And it leaves me then just to sincerely thank both of you. You've been really generous, not only with your time, but your thoughts, your experiences. That's not only fantastic for me to hear, but for our listeners. I hope you've had some insights today and it's piqued your interest. Of course, you can find out more about what the UK Agri-Tech Centre does on our website, ukagritechcentre.com, and our social channels. Bye for now. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.